Well, good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you to Art, Illustration, and AI, Navigating the New Creative Frontier. My name is Lorena Guzman Diaz, and I'm an associate at Weissman Law, and it's going to be my pleasure to help guide you through this really important discussion today. Today's session is designed to explore the intersection of artificial intelligence and the creative arts, and we're going to examine both the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead for artists and agencies alike. First and foremost, I would like to introduce Jeremy Wortsman, the founder and director of the Jacky Winner Group. Jeremy has built a really successful agency that adapts to the rapid changes of the creative industry, particularly with the emergence of AI. Joining Jeremy is Adam Wiseman. He's the founder of Wiseman Law. And Adam is going to be providing essential legal perspectives on the implications of AI in art, including IP rights and the ethical considerations that artists must navigate. Adam, I know you wanted to say a few words before I go in a little deeper.
Yeah, thanks, Lorena. So the reason we're having this conversation is I've had the privilege of working with Jeremy and his agency a little bit over the past few years. We were having a chat recently, actually, about a slightly different issue, sort of talking about where the industry is with respect to artists and illustrators today, and sort of what they need to be doing to survive insofar as building out a presence and an audience online in a way that maybe wasn't much of a thing a decade or two ago. Inevitably, the topic of artificial intelligence and how that's impacting this industry and other industries on a greater level came up. I've had the pleasure, I'll say, of being involved in many panels over the last year from a legal perspective, talking about AI. Those tend to be either completely negative, or on the flip side, they are just people throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. One of the things that is going to come up in this talk for sure is going to be an explanation of how copyright law is not really equipped to handle AI yet. There's a lot of things that are up in the air. We're not really sure what is copyrightable. We're not really sure what is infringing activity. But anyways, we're not going to solve that today. I think more interestingly, what we want to do today is really just talk about what individuals as artists should be doing going forward, what Jeremy is seeing in his role, what I'm seeing in my role, and Lorena as well, working with me on the legal end, and then just kind of take it from there. And I will tell you, I'm going to hand this back to Lorena in a second, who is going to talk about sort of where the law stands in the US right now with respect to copyright. This is just us in the US. We are talking with Jeremy, who's actually based in Australia and woke up early to do this with us. The law in the US is one way. I will tell you the law in other parts of the world is going drastically different ways. The law in China and Japan, for example, that's evolving right now, is a lot more aggressive insofar as determining what's protectable and what's not compared to what we're seeing over here. All that being said, it's all constantly evolving. We're going to see a lot of changes. With that, before I turn this to Jeremy, I am going to turn this back to Lorena, who's going to go through a little bit of an overview of where things stand in the US right now.
Thank you, Adam. So, Adam, as Adam said, before we begin, I want to first address the current state of the law regarding AI and visual works in the United States. So for those of you who may not know, the Copyright Office is the U.S. Copyright Office is the federal agency that oversees everything having to do with copyright registration in the U.S. and who gets to determine what is registrable and what is not registrable. Registration is what forms the basis for suing for copyright infringement. And for even more context, copyright protects human works of human authorship. So if AI is creating something, can it be considered human authorship? That's kind of one of the key questions that we'll be analyzing today, but that the Copyright Office has commented on in its recent report on the copyrightability of outputs created using generative AI. So this report reaffirms the longstanding requirement for human authorship and copyright protection. The central question that was posed by the Copyright Office in this report is whether the AI tool was merely used as an assisting instrument or if the traditional elements of authorship were conceived and executed by the AI itself, meaning without any human involvement. And that really is the linchpin of this report. This report maintains a high bar for meeting the human authorship requirement. It distinguishes between using AI as a tool to enhance human creativity versus allowing AI to make expressive choices independently. And it really is in the latter where the outputs make AI, where outputs make outputs where the AI makes create expressive choices is what really requires further analysis regarding human authorship. So, on the other side of the discussion is the question of whether using existing art to train AI models constitutes copyright infringement. So, before I dive into that, I just want to give a brief background. So, for those of you who might not know, so all these generative AI models, they're building up their knowledge base by taking existing work and ingesting it. It's been inputted in a way that like pattern recognition and pattern recall based on all of these inputs is being fed into a software that forms a database for the generative AI. And then this leads to AI learning. So whether uh, the question really is whether copyright infringement is to take all of these things that feed into the AI, that are fed into the AI and then creating something else. So this is a hotly debated topic. There's a few cases that are relevant to our discussion today. One is currently before the courts, and the other one was decided a few years ago. So the first one is Getty Images versus Stability AI. In this case, Getty Images has claimed that Stability AI's use of copyrighted images to train an AI model without permission constitutes copyright infringement. This case really raises critical questions about the fair use doctrine and whether the transformative nature of AI training can be defended in court. The second case is Oracle America versus Google. While this case is primarily about software, it touches on the broader implications of using AI works in new contexts. Truly, the outcome of especially the Getty Images versus Stability AI case, amongst other cases that are currently pending before the courts, are really going to significantly influence how the courts view the intersection of AI and copyright law moving forward. So, whether you're an artist, an agency professional, or someone who's just interested in the evolving landscape of creativity, today's session is designed to equip you with valuable insights for navigating this new frontier. We're going to really be talking about where things are right now and where things are going. So just before we start, just want to let you know that this is going to be a 35 to 40 minute panel discussion. We'll be touching on topics such as building an agency in a changing creative landscape, the impact of AI on artistic workflows, and the enduring value of human creativity in an increasingly automated world. We'll also explore how artists can differentiate themselves and protect their unique creative identities in this evolving environment. Then we'll open up the floor for a 20-minute Q&A session. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the session. Definitely encouraged. If you don't have any questions, I have some questions that I will do to not have an awkward silence. So once before we start, I want to remind everyone that this information shared in this webinar is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. For specific legal advice, we recommend consulting with a qualified attorney. So without further ado, Jeremy and Adam, welcome and thank you for joining us. Let's dive in.
Thanks. Thanks again, Lorena. So before we dive into anything too meaty, I wanted to hand the floor over to Jeremy, who has just been sitting patiently for the last 10 minutes or so. Listen to us give our legal spiel. Jeremy, I would love if you could give a little background on what you do over at the Jacky Winter Group, sort of what you've been doing over the span of your career, and then really where things are today that will help get us into the conversation that we really want to get into in the next half hour or so.
Sure, Adam. Yeah, again, thanks for having me. And Lorena, thanks for the intro. And thanks everyone watching wherever or whenever you are. Adam's drinking from our Jacky Winter promotional water bottle, I see. So good that that's getting some good use. Um, so yeah, Jacky Winter, we're primarily an illustration animation agency. We've established in Melbourne, Australia in 2007. We have offices in the US and the UK. And yeah, primarily we're an artist agency. We represent artists, we produce their work, we license their work. Really the source of our income as agency, we're commission-based agency. The source of our artist income is original commissions of work for ad agencies, direct to brands, publishing, editorial product, anything that you can think of that has illustrated content is pretty much an area that we work across. So that can really span lots of different things. And we work in a value-based pricing model. So licensing is really the kind of the core of, I guess, the economic underpinning of how the illustration agency and how most illustrators and most artists kind of sustain themselves, at least on the commercial side, through licensing and managing how the work can be used. So obviously, where it's interesting because all these technological developments in the past kind of 5 years that have been on the fringes, like, everything, it started with NFTs, I think in one way, that really came for illustration and illustrators are at the kind of forefront of this kind of cultural and technological movement. So it is surprising that now with AI, it's kind of very similar, that it is kind of illustration that's leading a lot of where this conversation is going. And some of the more controversial conversations in culture and in popular culture and in the conversation broadly are around art and illustration as well. So we're kind of in this really meaty intersection. We're not in the fine art world, but and we're not like fully in the commercial world. We kind of sit somewhere in the middle. So we see a lot, and we respond a lot. And AI is obviously just a very big concern for our artists and our industry. So I have a lot of opinions. A lot has so much has already been said on this. Like the amount of think pieces and everything that's out there is substantial. So I don't know if I'll be able to contribute anything groundbreaking, but maybe I can give a bit of a survey and personal opinion of where things are at and where things are going, which is what everyone wants to know. But
For sure.
we're
And
we're all waiting. Yeah.
I think give yourself some credit because most of the stuff that's coming out on AI these days, all the journal articles that we're reading are either just coming from reporters or often they're coming from folks from the AI companies themselves. There's a lot of bias in the writing that you see out there. I believe Microsoft just released a report yesterday was talking about the top 20 jobs that will be taken by AI or are already taken by AI, and then the top 20 that will be the safest. And you look at those and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, some of these make sense. I understand copy editing might be at risk because a lot of people are just running their writing through programs to make sure that there's no typos and grammatical errors there. But historian, as one of the top 20 jobs that's going to disappear, that's problematic and worrisome for a whole number of reasons. You dive deeper into it, you go, I'm not so sure about that. But what you are uniquely poised to do, and we don't see a ton of, is you work with artists directly. You represent them. I want to hear what you're seeing, kind of from the ground up. First off, before we get into the negatives, what sorts of tools are you actually seeing? Like, can you name the names of the different programs that maybe some of your artists are working with, or are venting to you about, or that are just coming up in your day-to-day practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing new. I think that's a really rapidly evolving space. I mean, you have your basic, Dolly, which is within ChatGPT. Um, Gemini, not so much. Midjourney, obviously, like one of the most popular tools at the moment. And then there's a lot of offshoots. Like, so there's a really big one called Krea right now that a lot of people are experimenting with. And then, of course, we have this just being baked into all of the existing products, like in Photoshop and in Figma now. In everything. So there's this AI layer that's kind of been inserted into everybody's workflow. And there's a lot of people who are trying to kind of figure out novel approaches for it as well. But realistically, to train one of these models, I mean, it's so resource intensive. It's very difficult to do something new. I mean, to compete with the behemoth companies that have the resources to do this, it's like there's a lot of grift out there. So trying to kind of sift between kind of what's actually a new and interesting platform versus what's just adding a layer on kind of what's already there is a whole other conversation.
So have you seen your artists, or even at your agency, are you integrating any tools yet?
On the visual side, I mean, this is the crux of the entire conversation. And this is kind of where our two worlds collide the most. And I mean, I'll go back to the legal side for a second, but correct me if I'm wrong here, but my basic understanding here is that at the moment, there really is no legal way to interface with an AI model, as far as I'm aware. Because and there's one of the big things at the moment that we're seeing and that a lot of clients want is they want to build digital twins of artists for their
Yes.
brands. So what that means is, say you're an artist and you developed a very inimitable style, and typically, what you do as an artist is, yeah, you work your entire career to kind of get this kind of one style. And then ideally, what's happening when a brand is commissioning you is they are renting that style off you. And since you're the only person who can do that style, if they're developing a whole brand or a campaign or identity around that style, they will keep coming back to you for this work. And so you as an artist have a lot of leverage because the brand is buying into that. Um, and then the brand has something that's kind of uniquely ownable visually. But that is also very expensive for the brand to do because they have to keep coming back to you. And because you have so much leverage, you can just kind of charge a lot. more for this as well. So if a brand can develop a robot that can replicate your style and do that, then why wouldn't they? I mean, this is kind of like it's no surprise why this happens. And people that are shocked by this, I'm like, this is like, this is like the weather. It's an inevitable force of
Yeah.
capitalism in terms of how that's going to work. So a lot of clients are asking for this now, like, and there's a lot of people who are trying to provide ways that you can kind of train your own style on this. So basically, okay, you feed in 10 pieces of your own work and it's going to develop this custom model, and then you can kind of license that. So a lot of people are looking for that, and that's kind of held up as this kind of this kind of beacon of hope of where things could potentially go to keep artists in business. But there's so many potential downfalls to that. But again, coming back to the main point though, is if you build one of these things, so you can feed in all your work as much as you want. Say you say like, okay, I've developed this style, I fed in all my work, and now I say, okay, generate me an image of an airplane in my style. So the AI can know what the style is, but how is the AI going to know what the airplane looks like? In order to do that, it has to have a bunch of reference images of airplanes. And so
Yeah.
right now, that the source of those images is completely um, it's completely unknown. It's just a black box of where those images have been scraped from. And there's people who've been trying to do things around it, like Adobe has Firefly, and they kind of have tried to do what they call like a free range model, saying that it's kind of trained on opted-in data from their stock imagery and things like that. But if you look at how those agreements were constructed in the first place, it's very I don't know. My armchair legal opinion of that is people who opted into that didn't know that was going to be the end use of it.
Yes, I
So
think I think one thing that I've already seen happen a couple times, and when you're going to stock images, is you have people getting paid licenses to hand over whatever their photos or their illustrations to a stock image library, not realizing that the license that they agree to unintentionally allows for AI training. And so you've now seen some stock libraries just hand it over for a fee to these companies and not pay the artist anything else and not get further consent. So that it certainly is an issue. I will say the way the law seems to be progressing right now, although there's a lot of cases that are up in the air, is there might be some courts saying it is fair use to train certain pieces of work. I'm forgetting the name of the case off the top of my head. And Lorena, if you already mentioned this one, I think the court was saying that there was fair use in the first instance of just training, but there was an issue about whether the items that were being trained with were stolen in the first place. So there's different levels to it, but in some ways it seems like, unfortunately or not, some of the law is progressing towards saying that some of this training may be fair use. We have to see what's up. Now, going back to the idea of kind of your style as an artist, this is a fascinating one to me. Just to sort of delineate between two things, you know, as you know, Jeremy, pieces of authorship, works, illustrations, pieces of art, those are protected by copyright. But this greater thing called style, ostensibly, is certainly not protected by copyright in and of itself, but it is potentially protected by things like trademark and trade dress and these related notions of brand. Disney launched a lawsuit very, very recently just making those arguments specifically, talking about how using their characters is trademark infringement and arguments bouncing off that. So it's really fascinating to see how that's going to play out long term. But like you already pointed out, and I'll get the floor back to you in a moment, the really difficult thing is, yeah, we don't have insight into what's happening inside of that piece of software when you are saying make something in the style of Jeremy, but it's something that Jeremy hasn't done before. What is the other input? The piece on top of that's also worrisome. We're not talking about the risk going in. The risk coming out is also that we don't even know, or as far as we do know, the work coming out the other end might not even be protectable by copyright in the first place. So on either end, if you, as let's say a brand, are trying to get into that mode versus the traditional way of I'm going to hire an artist to make something specific, you're taking this new model. You don't know if you're going to get in trouble on the front end or the back end yet. It's really up in the air, and it's scary, I think, to put those reps and warranties and guarantees to the artists themselves, because you see that sometimes too, where the brands will just flip it around and throw a bunch of language into contracts, basically saying this is on you to figure out, but we do want to work on this. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But going back to that, we're talking about negative. I know a lot of negative stuff is going to pop up. Are any of the artists you're working it with using, let's say, some of the more some of the less egregious, like Adobe tools, for example, to their benefit in ways that and creating new things that maybe you haven't seen in the past? Or is it truly just no one's sure what to do and nothing new is coming out of it yet?
I mean, this is it's a topic that has really just divided the community kind of so much. Very kind of similar to NFTs as well. It's like it is really a very toxic dialogue right now. It's
Mhm.
softening up a bit because there's so many kind of different aspects to it as well. I mean, especially amongst the artist community, the environmental impact of using these models is something that so many people are concerned about. And so even just bringing up AI in the slightest is a no-go for just a lot of people. And I think that is really so there's a lot of hesitation for people to kind of come out almost in public to say that they're kind of using it. Um, there was this, I mean, yeah, I don't know, like when we're recording this now in what,
Yeah.
July 31st here. So like, yeah, I think yesterday Nick Cave just came out with this new music video. And like he wrote a whole newsletter on like how he kind of has changed his mind about kind of AI as well. So it's like people are like it's still very divisive in that way. In terms of what people are really using for it, in terms of the positive, this is also a really tricky thing. The thing that I'm seeing is, and I was saying this kind of before, it's like there's there's internet life and there's kind of real life, and like there's those things are so obviously different. And the conversation around AI on the internet is very kind of heightened and hyperbolic when the actual use of how AI is being used like is just so much more kind of down to earth and technical, as you say. So from a copywriting perspective, for example, we use AI a lot in writing, but I would never have AI compose something for me completely new. I use it for that technical aspect. So from a creative side, people are really enjoying it from a compositional and research perspective. So if you need to comp something together, if you need to get a perspective of something, if you're developing a framework for something and you need to do something technically, visually, if there's a shortcut that that's going to give you, I've seen people use that to positive effect. But again, reference imagery as a whole, this is again opening up a black box of copyright and everything because even artists before AI who are using photographs for poses, like it's like, okay, I need to get a pose, I'm going to find a photo of this, or if you have to do a drawing of a celebrity for a magazine, like how are you going to get the image and what's coming from you, what's coming from the photographer? So there's always been this gray area. And I think in general, like you have experienced, like the law is there's so much gray area in it. And where people are willing to look the other way and kind of what's acceptable or not, like that, I think is kind of just shifting a lot as well. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different tentacles in this discussion, but I think reference imagery is kind of one of the biggest ones that we're kind of seeing at the moment. That's kind of more in static work. Obviously, when you go to animation, now we're opening up a whole new kind of set of tools. So in things like Runway and Google's VEO3, so in the motion animation component, that's where there's been so much development, so much quicker. And I think that's kind of where that's been much more of a threat to lots of
Yeah.
industry as well, because so many more specialists and so many more people are involved in all this kind of work. And a lot of that has now been really changed. I don't think it's necessarily I'm not seeing it kind of people are losing jobs at the moment, but the work is really, really changing. So we do a lot of storyboards, for example. So storyboards used to be a really big part of our business. And now how we're doing storyboards hasn't gone away completely, but it's radically changed in terms of the tools that people use, in terms of what clients expect, in terms of how much work they expect. So AI definitely is kind of changing the client expectations in terms of deliverables and all of that, and in terms of how far you can kind of take it. But it's also generating a lot of positive results because now it's just opening new opportunities for artists, and the kind of work that can be produced is also quite different and amazing. So yeah, sorry, there's a lot there, Adam. I could obviously
No,
talk
no,
about
that's
this
great.
forever.
And I want to maybe get a little more information from you on the storyboard piece. So tell me practically what's happening. Is this leading to lower fees for that stage of work? Is it just leading to your artist making significantly more output in a small amount of time? How, like, what's on the ground? What's happening now differently from the brand expectation side and then from your artist creation side when it comes just to storyboards?
I think with it's interesting with storyboards. like anything else with AI, it's only as good as the input that you're giving it as well. And it is really difficult to give good input for no matter what you do. And so a lot of storyboard artists are really just only working in, a lot of them are only working in AI at the moment, especially once now that they've cracked this persistence issue, which was less of an issue, well, more of an issue a year ago. So if you're doing a storyboard and you're trying to do a character and you want that character to appear the same in every frame, um, that was really hard to do. But now you can create a character, you can get a key for that character, you can insert that into the prompt, and you'll get that persistence across it. So most storyboard artists are just working in AI in that regard, but in terms of it's a lot more collaborative with the client as well. So previously, you just get the script, it would go to the storyboard artist, and then like they would deliver the frames. There might be some back and forth. Now it's much more of a deeper collaboration. The storyboard artist can actually is expected to do more, and so it's almost kind of like animatics especially usually were kind of reserved only for larger productions and really
Right.
big things, because you need to then animate that and do get VOs or get music or other things, get some 3D. Now the storyboard artists can effectively they can build up a smaller team, they're expected to do a lot of that themselves as well. So everything is kind of now an animatic and there's not just kind of static frames. So there's a lot more that's kind of being expected, but there's a lot more room for storyboard artists to kind of productize their offering to show the different ways of how they can approach it. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot there I can go on about.
And I mean, just for context, were these storyboard artists usually operating as solo freelancers, or do they have teams helping them out with the various aspects of their work?
It's pretty much solo now, but I mean, one thing that we've now done is like we've kind of packaged these offerings as well. So we're able to kind of bring people together, work with different AI tools, and this is the advantage as well. Like storyboarding is kind of one of the safer moats in this area because when you're
Mhm.
storyboarding, nothing is ever like the whole point of storyboarding is so then you can commission a production company to make the thing. So it's
Yes.
really kind of like, and that's also encouraging because like you can get you the reason you're storyboarding stuff is to get ideas across and get your client excited about it. So the access that creatives now have at ad agencies to get these ideas across, and they can get bigger ideas across and more complex ideas across, that could be a boon to production companies as well. But like, yeah, going back to your original question, it's the individual artists can do a lot more of that themselves now as well. But we also can put together teams, which we're doing too.
And what's the general sentiment of these artists basically having their jobs shift into very different scope from what it used to be?
A lot of storyboard artists they're typically more they're a bit old school. They're a bit older as well because they've kind of come maybe from traditional studio environments. And then, maybe they kind of came from like your Disneys or whatever. And like, then they kind of became independent storyboarders or maybe they work for a movie studio. So it's a generational thing. And what we noticed around like maybe 10 years ago is it was really hard to get those old school artists onto storyboarding briefs because they look old, so they wanted to find more traditional illustrators to do this kind of storyboarding work. So it is interesting. Like the storyboarding industry has kind of been shaken up a bit in that way. I'm so sorry. Now I lost track of your initial question. What was that again?
How do they feel? I just like
Oh yeah, how do
it's
they feel?
yeah, it's
Right. So basically like, these are people kind of, in their 50s and 60s who like really still need to be working, but they were on the prime line. They were on the firing line of what was being affected first. And so kind of I think there was the canary in the coal mine where saw storyboard jobs just kind of drop off kind of completely. So that's where we kind of knew we needed to kind of take it more seriously. And I think it was a real inflection point where they need to decide, am I going to keep doing this? Try to keep doing the same thing, or I'm going to have to change my work. And a lot of them did have to kind of change their work, and some who haven't had to go and find different things. But every artist or creative is always doing 6 or 7 different jobs or professions. So not every like there's very few people who are pure storyboard artists, and the ones who were, I think, yeah, have been very quick to move.
got it. What are you seeing going to, let's say, brand illustrators? What's the conversation looking like there between you as the agent talking to the brands? And has anything changed? What's the tone? Are we still getting the same sort of uh, understanding of the need for the artists you work with? What are things looking like there?
I mean, this is the million-dollar question that I think everyone is just kind of waiting to see. A lot of, I mean, the thing about AI, and we were talking about this before again, is like the novelty factor is so high, and the internet and culture runs on novelty. And so there's a lot of high visibility cases where larger studios are using AI in big brand projects. So I don't remember which website this was for, but Pentagram, one of the biggest branding studios in the world, like pretty much developed this design system all based on UI in conjunction with their designers. They did this case study. I mean, the comments were just wild to kind of read through. I think it was very provoking. They responded kind of quite well to it. But if you look at the work that was produced, I don't know, it's very interesting to see that that was kind of done, that they were the first ones to kind of do it and be public about it. So that kind of shifts the conversation. But I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously completely biased. I don't know if the work was kind of that successful, like in the end. So I think like, and again, clients are very reluctant to use it until they can figure out what their legal positioning is as well. Um, Clients who are kind of first to jump on it, I think, get a real big boost
Yeah.
in from a PR effect from just kind of doing it. And I've seen this kind of in especially in TV commercials. Um, and they're getting really good performance, but I think we're going to see that kind of drop off quite dramatically, like once that's kind of not, a big deal anymore. But yeah, in terms of brand illustration, is the reason people typically use illustration in brand work is A, because they don't have the budget for photography, or B, they want to kind of own a specific niche or style, as I was kind of talking about before. But then, as you've seen with things like kind of corporate Memphis, for example, these styles like escape containment. And then the thing that you tried to do that was kind of so unique, now everyone else is doing, everything kind of gets lost, and you have to kind of start that cycle again. So it kind of does kind of go in cycles. And I think the the real question here is how close can the AI kind of get to what artists can actually do, and where they're kind of bringing that human kind of element to their work. I mean, and my entire thesis at the moment is there is a certain quality that artists are bringing to their work that um, is just ineffable in a way. It's like there's something still that when you look at a piece of AI work, you just know it's AI. Just like when you look at a piece like of stock photography, and again, not everybody knows this. I mean, and that's why stock photography is still used because it is good enough for a lot of people. But it's like people who are visually literate, you can spot a stock photo a mile away. You just know that because you're visually literate. And I think because we live in such a visual society, people are becoming increasingly visually literate. So they just know these things. So it's like whether AI can kind of cross that threshold is like I think that's the only question in this whole argument, and nobody knows that. And you have so many technologists and people that like are just all gung ho and like think that like are convinced that that's going to happen, and then some people don't, and so nobody knows. Really, the only thing that we can do is just kind of wait and see. And when that happens, like, is that going to change things dramatically? Like, maybe. I don't know. Yeah,
And
I don't
it's
know.
difficult to say when it happens because even in you describing it, there's no black or white tests that we can apply to know when we've crossed that threshold or whether that threshold even truly exists. I mean, one thing that we do see coming up a little bit more frequently now in the studies of AI is basically this acknowledgement that it's really nothing more than extreme pattern recognition. So I think on top of people maybe having a sixth sense of knowing that this is AI, and I will share a funny story in a minute about that, there's the other piece of if this is all we have, there's not going to be anything new, right? It's just going to be the same rehash of the same thing, which of course, we do work in traditional entertainment as well. We work in film. One thing that has been a major gripe with our film clients, obviously, is that a lot of big budget films are only being made that are reboots and sequels and all these other things. And finally, I think we're getting to a place where audiences are getting sick of that too. So it's really interesting to see that play out in a much sort of larger, less technical space, coming to here going like, okay, maybe it's just going to be that people will eventually go, everything looks the same and there's nothing new. And the whole point of art, whether it's branded stuff or just people doing their own projects, is to provoke and to create something new and to catch an audience's eye, not because it looks like something that came before it, but because it's actually grabbing their attention because it's something they haven't seen before. So, I share your thought on this like ineffable quality of the artist, but I'm also optimistic that, just newness is something that we always need moving forward. One thing I will say is I was in France a few months ago and got off of the subway and see this. I saw this giant mural that was actually a photograph, or looked like a photograph rather, on the side of a building. And it was a very simple wedding scene, with the only standout being that one person was in a dinosaur suit. And I could tell something was off. The hands looked fine, like there wasn't anything too specific. It just, the suit just looked a little not real. And then you go look at the bottom, and in French it says this is an AI generated image. And then the question becomes, why did they do this? Why did they do this? I got off and I was like, this is weird. But maybe my spidey sense is stronger than others because I'm working in this field as well and I'm kind of attuned to it. But then the question becomes, what's the purpose of doing this in the first place? I think really the purpose boils down to it's probably a lot cheaper to do that than orchestrating an entire photo shoot with, it only had about 7 people in it, but with 7 models and a photographer and a set designer and a stylist and hair and makeup and a lighting person and all these people that at the end of the day, even for a small shoot, it's you're going to get to 12, 15 people very easily. So it's a money saving thing. But then on the other end of it, we have to see how audiences and customers and consumers react because if they're going to be sort of thrown off by that stuff and still kind of are able to identify something that doesn't seem right with it, then that's going to be the answer there. Because if sales go down because they're using AI stuff, if people are pissed off at Coca-Cola for using AI in their television commercial, there's a reason for it. And part of it, like you said, it's a lot of loud people on the internet stirring up a lot of noise on both sides of the argument. But I think the average person, has opinions regardless of that.
100%. Absolutely.
What I guess the tougher question, kind of bouncing off some of this stuff, and if you don't feel like talking about it and don't feel like getting into it because this affects your hours, like are you seeing a marked difference in the market with less commissions coming to your clients as a result in the past year that is directly attributable to AI, or is it too early or too difficult to say?
I do think it's too early. I do think that a lot of I think clients are very cautious around public sentiment at the moment and very sensitive to it. And so people are really kind of just not willing to kind of dive in. And I do think that the um and I have definitely seen deliberate instances where I know we have lost work to AI.
Mhm.
And I think that's fine. Or I mean, it's not fine, but like, yeah, it's kind of happened. Um, when the barriers legally come down, will that open the floodgates more? I mean, like you said, I don't know. Like it does, like, and I think the sentiment really kind of changes every day. Like, sometimes it feels like we're just, boiling a lobster. It's just kind of ha happening slowly and we're dying slowly and slowly. And that's something that I'm personally so interested in. Like you look at, I don't know, like I love looking at kind of these stock illustration books. Like, they were the size of phone books and they were kind of out there in the 90s. You'd have to pay like 10 grand a page as an agency just to get a page in there. And there were so many agencies and so many artists working. And then where are all those people now? Like where are all those stock books now? Like they just don't exist. And so these changes, they happen so slowly. And it's kind of you have to kind of know kind of where your blind spots are. And so, and I think because things are happening so quickly right now, it's really kind of hard to tell. So, us as an agency and the advice that I give to artists as well is really to make sure that you're working across a really broad spectrum of work because we don't know which industry is going to be affected the most and which ones might really benefit. A big buzzword that I'm hearing at the moment is this whole thing about the trust economy. So really, it's like the one value that's going to really be sustainable is whether like how much you can trust a vendor, how much you can trust the company.
Yeah.
And so I think AI kind of does erode that trust in a way because it's like, well, oh, I thought I was looking at something like you were saying, but I was actually looking at something else. So I think like inherently there is something about AI that does erode trust between consumers. So I think the idea of commissioning human work, um, even though and also there are the technical limitations. Like it is still really hard to commission stuff in AI that is passable. So another thing that I mean, again, this is not new advice by any means, but like every if every creative needs to be kind of a client themselves in that way. So you have to be working through these tools yourself and like at least know what they're capable of. Because until you can see like where the limits are, then you don't know how to position yourself. And but like if you also yeah, like there's always like these kind of jumps in tools. Like I learned design on Quark Express and then had to go to InDesign, and now everyone's on Figma, and I never learned Figma. I don't have the time to learn Figma now, so I have to rely on other people doing it. But Figma has really changed like how design happens, and now there's a whole new generation of designers using Figma, and the whole collaborative workflow of designing anything has kind of changed. So I think yeah, we as long as the artists are kind of using the tools and kind of and I think that can also be a way to kind of calm nerves as well because there's a lot of hysteria around it. And again, what we see is just what's above the surface. We see the demos and we see the best case scenarios. Um, and a lot of industries where it is being kind of used is anyway. Yeah, that's all I kind of say about that. Sorry, I can go on a bit of a rant here.
No,
Just
no, that's fair enough. I think the trust economy piece is smart, and I'll say from our own side of things, we saw Sam Altman at OpenAI, I believe, sometime in the last few days, basically admit that hey, anything you type on ChatGPT could be used as evidence in court if we're ever subpoenaed, and you start going, maybe I shouldn't be asking ChatGPT really important legal questions that could implicate me in the future. It's kind of the same idea of you don't really know what's going on there and you don't know what's going to come out of it. And even getting away from just the legal issues and potentially getting in trouble, you don't know that the thing that's coming out the other end is good because part of the value of working with an illustrator who's been doing it for 15, 20 plus years is they've seen it, they've tested their craft and they know what works and what doesn't. Whereas no one is no one is giving, these different platforms rules on what makes a good brand logo or a good, type font or something like that for a particular business. They're just taking what they've seen before, and there's a lot of crap out there too that isn't very good. That they're going to amalgamate all of that and then pop something out that no human being is saying this is good, but maybe someone at the brand who has zero experience in the space is going, oh yeah, this platform made this for me. It must be great. That's a big part of it too. I think getting that sort of stamp of approval, knowing that you have an actual artist with experience work on something for you makes a big difference.
I've got a question for Jeremy, kind of going back to something he said earlier, kind of piggybacking off of Adam. So, you were saying that you have lost some like works to AI. So then like the opposite of that, can you maybe share a project or a moment where like the human element kind of made all the difference despite all the different technological advances that we have seen recently? Sorry, I put you on the spot. Oh, you're muted. He can't unmute himself.
Oh, I wonder how that happened. Uh, Fixed it right there.
Thanks. Sorry, I muted myself to clear my throat, and then I just realized I was trapped. Um, I'm so sorry, but could you just repeat that question again, please?
Yes.
I was yeah.
You were busy. It's okay. Yeah, I was wondering if you could share a project or a moment where the human element made all the difference despite the technological advances that we've seen recently. And I asked this because earlier you said that you have lost, certain projects or work to AI. So I kind of want to touch on the opposite of that.
Oh, I mean, and that is the whole kind of flip side of. I mean, there's so many different ways to answer this, but basically, look at there's so many areas of where artists are being engaged now specifically for things that cannot be replicated. So environmental work is a really big growth area for us. So people really want experiences. They want things in real life. So when you get an artist to paint a mural, for example, or when you get an artist to do a sculpture, so creating real tangible things, and artists working in that field is growing. As kind of a alternative to what we're kind of seeing on screens as well. And I mean, and if you look at kind of where things are going on the internet as well, this whole idea that we're going to be in this agentic internet where there's not going to be any, it's like, the whole ChatGPT way of using the internet is all text-based. There's no interface, there's no graphics. So I think, and then once we get to the stage of, you have agents talking to agents talking to agents, like why do you need to have any graphics on the internet? So the idea that graphics and art moving into the real world that can only be done by real people, or there's this real kind of element to it, is something that we see a lot more of. And maybe it's not explicitly, people might not reference AI explicitly, but that is, you can see a correlation there in terms of wanting more of this experiential work done. And then, of course, there's like the whole influencer side of things, which we haven't even touched on, but engaging artists because of how they see the world and who they are as people, and how they're being worked with and engaged that way as well. So I think the whole the whole ecosystem of how artwork is commissioned and what it's for, um, I don't see that kind of going away anytime soon at all. And I wish I could remember this stat, but like I was just reading that I think art school and admissions in the US are the highest that they've ever been. Like people are still enrolling in art school, which to me seems kind of insane. I don't know if I'd want my kids to do that, but like there is this kind of calling to do that. And I think there are commercial opportunities like that are still that are evolving. And it really is kind of changing. So yeah, that's kind of all I'll say on that. Thank you. I hope that addresses
Yeah,
that
and I
one.
and I think we'll have probably another talk in the future going into the influencer side of things with artists because certainly something we see as someone who represents both visual artists as well as creators is this huge trend of audiences wanting to see what the heck is happening behind closed doors in studio, what people's processes look like. And it's really exciting that more folks are getting interested in that. And I will tell you, I have a feeling the reason we're seeing such a rise in people attending art school is probably at least partially attributable to things like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram giving kids insight into what it's actually like to do the work because it is a lot easier now if you live in a small town that doesn't have access to a big art industry to still see what artists are actually doing than it ever was. So there are some positive pieces there, absolutely. But that's again, I feel like we'll have a talk about that sometime in the next couple of months. We've been going on for about 45, 50 minutes now. I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the audience who wants to type in a question. Please go for it. We'll give you a minute or two to do that. But Miranda, I know you came ready with a bunch of questions. Before you dive into that, though, um, Jeremy, is there kind of and I'm going to put you on stop. Are there any major takeaways or thoughts or sort of reflections that you want to offer up before we go just to a random smattering of questions from people? The answer could just be no. I've said enough.
I have said most of what I want to say, and I think like I just think the main takeaway is that everyone just kind of like, and I don't even think I have the fullest understanding of AI, but it is kind of part of my workflow. It's something I've had to kind of bring in. So it's like, especially if you're an individual sole trader, individual operator, it's like you're doing your own marketing, you're doing your own IT, you're doing your bookkeeping and finance. Hopefully you're not doing your own legal, but you're doing your own art as well. So I think AI just has to be like another thing that's worked into that process of everyone's kind of professional development or kind of something that you kind of put time towards getting your head around.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Look, us over here at the law firm are figuring that out now, knowing that there is a place for it. Trying to figure out where that is, trying to see which of these platforms that are popping up are actually still going to be around in 2 or 3 years. Because just like the NFT craze from a few years ago, a lot of people are putting money into it that's going to dry up as soon as they realize there's no return on investment. So more than half of the companies that are popping up these days probably will not be around in another year and a half. That's a side note. We have a question from Roseanne Harris saying, how is it different for artists who work for big studios and for artists who work on commissions only? She's specifically asking about storyboard artists and others who work in animation. Wondering, Jeremy, if you have any insight there.
I mean, again, like I was saying before, like the I have never seen a business. I mean, there are some great social enterprise businesses that want to look after their team, but most businesses are machines that need to extract profit. And so when there's a chance to kind of cut down and do things, then I they're going to take them. So I do think that. Yeah, especially animation, VFX studios, things like that. I mean, they are so top heavy in terms of resources. And look at the big change that happened. I mean, even when, you had these editing companies that like were charging $1,000 an hour to use these machines that, now the Mac Mini can do, what you would have to pay $20,000 a day for an editing suite. And so like there's just a lot of retooling that's happening of these studios that really relied on a lot of human resources to make. So I do think it is different, and I think like it is difficult. Like I'm not underscoring the incredible difficulty that's happening in the industry right now, especially in VFX live action. There's a lot of change going there, but I think the freelance economy is also kind of shifting to allow for that as well. So I think people are going to be moving around a bit. Um, and so I do think that if I worked at a big studio, I would be thinking about how I kind of fit and what a freelance career kind of could look like. Or a lot of smaller studios are forming out of those bigger studios as well. And that's happening in kind of every industry as well. So like people kind of forming like smaller pods or communities and working that way as well. So that's something I would definitely be looking at.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, I'm seeing a lot in our client base. We work with a lot of creative advertising agencies who are sort of being cut out of the conversation in many instances, especially the larger agencies are losing a lot of their main clients. And we've seen a lot of people go from big agency to freelancers in the last year and a half in a scale that honestly I don't think I've really seen in the last 10 years of my career. It's been positive for them. It's been really, really good. It's all actually been sort of exciting developments for them where they're realizing they can run a business and work more closely with the brands or the clients they want to work with and get really satisfying work done. Where things are not as positive with that development, and I'm not seeing this directly, but it's sort of where I see the writing on the wall is a lot of artists, a lot of folks in advertising, in production, in editing, you name it, will get their first years of experience at these really large companies. And the new freelance companies, whether it's, two or three partners or even a team of 5 to 10, often don't have the bandwidth and the budget to hire juniors who need to learn. And so that's potentially going to be a bottleneck in a lot of these industries, I think, in the next handful of years, seeing where all of these people are coming out of college and not getting the entry level jobs that they need because these small agencies or firms are not able to hire them in the same way. I mean, I've even been talking about that in the legal field too. So that's kind of the flip side of the really cool thing. I think it's great when artists can build their own businesses by themselves and aren't reliant on a single employer. But that works really well for people who have the experience. It doesn't really work that well for people who have never been in the job market before. Let's see. Any other questions?
There's one from Cheryl.
Yeah. All right, Cheryl. How would you see AI affecting the video game industry? I've noticed companies using AI for illustrations like background art and for other parts like voice acting. Cases like that, the players are usually unhappy to find that out. So there, I believe SAG just came to an agreement for voice actors in the video game space this week, which I don't have the full details of. I here are the positive things I've heard from video game publishers and developers. Using AI is going to give people the ability to interact in real time with basically characters that almost seem alive. It's not true artificial intelligence. They don't have conscious minds the way we think of it, but the amount of pattern recognition is unbelievable. I believe Fortnite was doing that with Darth Vader not too long ago, where there was a Darth Vader character you could just go up to and ask literally any random question, which from a novelty perspective is fascinating. But going to the perspective of, is this actually something new that we care about? I don't know. Um, you hit a good point, which is, yeah, the audiences and the customers tend to be unhappy when they find out that something was AI, just like Jeremy was saying, when they had no reason to believe it was. The trust is being eroded. Why that trust is being eroded, or why there's an expectation that a human being created something, is probably a much deeper, tougher issue to think about. Jeremy, you have any hand in the video game space at all with the work you do?
Just at an arm's length. I mean, obviously, video games are an industry that's eclipsing or has eclipsed, obviously, movies and TV in some ways. So and their fan bases are also just as intense and devoted. Um, I think they're in terms of this idea, like I mean, the stuff that indie studios are now able to do from a video game perspective is amazing, and I think we're going to see a lot of AAA games that were only able to be done by these massive studios being done by smaller teams. So I think there's probably going to be a movement there. But yeah, like the whole thing of I think that's going to become much more kind of normalized. Like I think like we were talking before about like, and again, I don't know if this is for better or for worse, but you look at what people are kind of willing to ignore kind of in the things that we consume. It's like I don't know, like how much, we still don't know where our clothes are made, like always. And like it's like, and we probably will, we willingly do a lot of things that are probably against the values that we uphold ourselves on. And I think, but it's like it's hard when you're just in this cavalcade of content and information and trying to navigate things. Like, yeah, things will kind of fall away. So I think like some of this stuff, like yeah, like background elements and sprites, like in video games, if they're created by AI, like I think the care level will probably decrease on those things and they won't become as an issue. So I think the novelty factor really works in both ways. So when something is new, it gets a lot of attention. It could be positive attention, it could be negative attention, but eventually those things will just kind of converge and then we have a new baseline and then we got to hopefully like it's the idea of the game and the experience and other things will be more part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think also it's easy for us. I'm an elder millennial. I even remember when I started using the internet when I was 10, 11, 12, and it's still something that we had questions about. But kids who are growing up with this stuff, who it's just in their face from day one, they don't even have the opportunity to question it because it just is what it is. And it's going to be really interesting to see, Gen Alpha grow up with AI products in their face the second they're gaining their own, consciousness and not have the ability to go, wait, 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 I missed this thing from before because they didn't have that thing from before. Lorraine, you want to wrap us up with any questions?
No, I think we're just about time. So should
Perfect.
I?
Okay. Well, in that case, Jeremy, thank you so much for attending tonight or this morning over in Australia. This was an absolute pleasure. Definitely want to have you back in the not too distant future to talk about some of these things that we just barely touched on today. Thank you, everyone who attended tonight. Thank you, everyone who's watching this on YouTube. Please, if you don't already, follow us on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We're going to be doing more webinars as we go on. We already have the August 1 plan, which we'll announce probably early next month. Jeremy, are there any call to actions or other things you'd like to tell the audience to do while you have their attention?
We're actually working on a really interesting AI marketing project that's going to be exploring some of these questions in a bit more depth. So, yeah, best to follow us on Instagram at Jacky Winter, Jacky with a Y, Winter like the season, or sign up to our newsletter when we announce that in a few weeks.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll see you all again soon.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Lorena. Bye bye.